Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a battlefield, but there are no swords, no bullets, no banners waving in the wind. Just silence. Deafening, eerie silence. Around you, the ground is cracked, scorched with invisible wars. No enemies in sight, but something in the air hums with tension. You look down and realize you are unarmed. No shield, no armor, just skin, trembling slightly in the cold wind of expectation. And then you notice something even more unsettling. Every woman beside you, young or old, bruised or smiling, defiant or trembling, is also standing there, weaponless, no helmets, no protection. But they are standing. Some are bleeding internally from wars no one ever saw. Others have buried parts of themselves in shallow graves just to keep walking. Their silence isn't peace, it's pressure. Their smiles are not serenity, they are strategies. Their grace is not gifted, it is forged day after day from fire. Now ask yourself, what kind of war requires its soldiers to march without armor? What kind of world demands that a woman be soft and steel, nurturing and unyielding, invisible and impeccable, all at once? What kind of war expects you to cradle others with one hand while extinguishing the fire engulfing your own chest with the other? You see, the battlefield is not made of mud and bullets. It's made of kitchen floors where she hides her tears from children. It's in boardrooms where her voice must fight through veils of condescension. It's in the quiet moments when she looks in the mirror and no longer recognizes the reflection staring back. It's in texts she never sends, truths she never speaks, and dreams she buries beneath duty. Here lies the paradox. She is told she is strong. She is told she is sacred. She is told she is everything, but only if she is nothing that disrupts. She must endure but not express her pain. She must lead without threatening. She must ache quietly, smile authentically, multitask expertly, and suffer gracefully. She is praised for her strength in silence and punished the moment that silence breaks. And yet, she wakes up every morning, puts on her unseeable cape, faces 1,000 micro battles, and no one hands her a medal for surviving the 1,000th cut. Have you ever truly considered what it means to fight wars no one even acknowledges? Have you ever wondered what it costs to be everyone's safe haven while having nowhere to rest yourself? She may not wear armor, but she has grown calluses on her soul. She has developed the kind of reflexes only the wounded know, flinching at certain words, retreating from softness because it once betrayed her, offering compassion because she understands what it's like to be without it. No sword, no shield. But somehow she protects, she provides, she persists. The truth is, every woman is a warrior, but without armor, and maybe, just maybe, that's not a sign of empowerment. Maybe it's the most haunting indictment of all. What happens to the spirit when it must always be resilient but never allowed to rest? What happens when survival becomes identity? When strength is no longer a choice, but a sentence? What if the armor was never missing, because it was never offered? What if she was never meant to have it? And more terrifying still, what if she never asked, because she was taught that asking was weakness, that needing was shameful, that resting was selfish? So she became fluent in endurance. She became fluent in invisibility. She stitched herself together with quiet defiance until even she began to believe that bleeding out slowly was just life. But beneath all that, beneath the practiced smile, the perfect reply, the rehearsed strength, there is a scream, a raw, guttural scream that the world cannot hear, or perhaps refuses to. You hear it faintly now, don't you? In the friend who always says, "I'm fine," too quickly. In the mother who never puts herself on the list. In the executive who is twice as prepared just to be seen as equal. In yourself, perhaps most of all. The battlefield rages on, and the silence grows louder. But what if silence is not strength? What if resilience, when demanded without reprieve, becomes a form of erasure? What if the war is not only external but internal, psychological, existential? And if so, who truly benefits from her going to war without armor? You've felt this, haven't you? The contradiction, the weight, the quiet rage. Then lean in, because we are only beginning to understand this war. The roots run deeper than we think, and they are not just historical. They are psychological, philosophical, inherited, insidious. Let's go deeper. Let's uncover the hidden mechanism that forged this battlefield in the first place. Because only then can we ask the real question, not how to survive it, but whether we were meant to fight this way at all. There is a kind of prison that doesn't need bars, one that isn't built by hands but by myths. And you, like every woman, were born into it long before you had language to question it. This prison is not physical, it's existential. It tells you who you are before you ever decide. It hands you a costume, scripts your lines, and applauds when you perform, so long as you don't ad-lib. But who wrote this script? Let's start with a disturbing idea. Perhaps the greatest oppressor is not a man, or a system, or a law, but a story. A story so old that we've forgotten it was fiction. A story that shaped religions, politics, and philosophies. A story that whispered into cradles and screamed from pulpits. A story that said, "You are divine only in your ability to serve. You are sacred only when silent. You are powerful only when your power is invisible." Carl Jung called it the anima, the feminine archetype buried in the collective unconscious. But what happens when this archetype is not integrated, but idealized into distortion? When the feminine is no longer human, but angelic, graceful, intuitive, self-sacrificing, always giving, never demanding, a holy figure, too holy to have needs. Nietzsche, with his cold brilliance, offered a terrifying critique. Man made woman in his image of desire, then punished her for being unreal. What a paradox! The very ideal that exalts women also imprisons them. From the myth of Eve, cursed for her curiosity, to Pandora, blamed for unleashing chaos, the feminine has been shaped by fear, not fear of her fragility, but fear of her power. So power was stolen through narrative, not by saying, "You are weak." That would be too crude. The story said, "You are strong because you endure. You are powerful because you forgive. You are beautiful when you yield." Thus, the warrior was born without armor, because her strength was never meant to protect her. It was meant to be consumed. Now think, how does that shape a psyche? Enter Jean-Paul Sartre, who said, "Man is condemned to be free." But he forgot to mention, woman is condemned to be contradictory, to be emotional but not irrational, sensual but not sexual, smart but not threatening, strong but not intimidating, soft but not weak. It is a psychological tightrope with no safety net. And when she falls, it's not the rope that is blamed, it's her. This double bind creates what Viktor Frankl might call existential frustration, a soul at war with itself, unable to move forward or backward without betrayal. Betrayal of self, betrayal of society, betrayal of what she was told she must be. And here lies the hidden mechanism. It is not oppression through violence. It is oppression through expectation. Aldous Huxley once warned us that the future wouldn't be Orwellian chains, but pleasure, distraction, sedation. A woman is sedated by approval, addicted to praise, kept compliant by the illusion of having it all. She can work, she can speak, she can vote. But can she scream without shame? Can she fail without being labeled? Can she want without apology? Number because the story still lingers, rewritten into modern language, but carrying ancient weight. She is told now, you can be anything, but what she hears is, you must be everything and you must never make it look hard. So she internalizes the war. She becomes both the oppressor and the oppressed. She polices her own desires. She questions her anger. She doubts her instincts. She feels guilt for resting, shame for wanting more, fear for saying no. And all of it happens in silence. That is the genius and cruelty of this hidden architecture. The battlefield is internalized before it is ever challenged. She begins to wonder if it's just her, if she's the problem, if she's not strong enough, graceful enough, grateful enough. But it's not her fault. It is a philosophical con, a war of identity disguised as virtue. Arthur Schopenhauer, though deeply flawed in his views, once said that life is suffering and the wise learn to accept it. But what he missed, what every woman knows intuitively, is that suffering is not always noble. Sometimes it is weaponized. She is told that pain is part of the package, that to nurture means to bleed, that to love is to sacrifice, that to mother, sister, partner, lead requires annihilation of self. So she complies, she minimizes, she adapts, because adaptation is survival, and survival is what she was trained for. But let's not mistake survival for freedom. Let's not confuse endurance with choice. Let's not call her resilience a gift when it was actually her last defense. You see, we rarely question systems that reward us for compliance, especially when they do so with compliments. She's so strong. She holds everything together. She never complains. Yes, because she can't. Because the moment she does, she is too much, too angry, too emotional, too sensitive. What an elegant trap. She becomes a fortress made of skin, and the more invincible she appears, the more invisible her suffering becomes. But remember this, every fortress is also a prison, and prisons, no matter how beautifully built, are still cages. So here we are, staring at the bars most cannot see, built from expectations, philosophies, and ancient myths. The warrior, revered and restrained, free to move, but only within an invisible maze. But something inside her is shifting, a tremor in the soul, a questioning, a refusal, because she is beginning to remember something older than the myths, older than the stories, something primal, sacred, untamed. The armor may have been denied, but the fire was not, and that fire is growing, because a question now burns behind her eyes, no longer whispered but rising. What if the armor I've been waiting for is the very thing I was taught to reject? That question is dangerous. That question is revolutionary, and it will lead us deeper into the next layer of this reality, the unseen consequences that have shaped not just individual lives, but entire societies. Consequences that have kept women surviving, but not living. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, not to check your hair, not to fix your clothes, but to try and see yourself. Not the performance, not the mask, you. But the mirror doesn't show you that. It shows a version of you that's been edited by culture, by memory, by fear. A version that smiles when she's tired nods when she disagrees, and shrinks just enough to fit comfortably inside someone else's idea of feminine. You stare at that reflection and feel the quiet dissonance. This is me, but not quite. That tension, that haunting disconnect, is the echo of unseen consequences, the long shadows of a war never named, and they run deep. You don't notice at first because these consequences don't scream, they whisper. They show up when you hesitate to take credit for your own work, when you apologize before expressing a need, when you stay silent in rooms where you are more qualified than anyone else, when you say yes because no would be too loud, when you're tired but still smile, aching but still pour, unraveling but still hold everything together. They show up in a million microscopic decisions, small daily amputations of the self, because you've been trained to calculate your worth by how well you disappear into the roles expected of you. And the consequences, they're not just emotional, they are neurological, cognitive, chemical, cellular. The brain, after all, doesn't just store information, it stores patterns. Every time you suppress your voice, your nervous system encodes that suppression as safety. Every time you override your intuition to please others, your brain logs that denial as survival. You are literally rewired to self-abandon, and it doesn't stop there, because society reinforces it, subtly, expertly, invisibly. Let's take a brief detour into cognitive bias. The confirmation bias tells us that once we believe something about ourselves, like, I must not upset others, or I'm not good enough unless I'm perfect, we begin to seek evidence that it's true. We remember only the moments that support the belief. We discard the ones that don't. This creates a psychological trap. A woman becomes both the jailer and the jailed. She doesn't need external punishment. She does it to herself. And then there's the spotlight effect. The belief that everyone is watching and judging you more than they actually are. It keeps you self-conscious, small, compliant. Add to that the halo effect, where one trait, like being nice or likable, overshadows others like intelligence, ambition, or leadership. So what does this mean? It means that even when a woman speaks, people hear her tone before her message. Even when she leads, they question whether she's too much. Even when she rises, there's a ceiling made of unspoken discomfort and inherited expectations. These aren't just random biases, they're the scaffolding of culture. A culture that fears feminine power unless it is disguised as sacrifice. And the cost? Oh, the cost is devastating. It's the woman who develops autoimmune diseases from decades of emotional suppression. It's the leader who burns out because she thought asking for help was weakness. It's the teenager who starves herself to match a body built by Photoshop and shame. It's the friend who seems to have it all, but feels hollow inside because her life is a performance. It's the millions of women who lie awake at night, wondering why they feel so exhausted, so unseen, so lost, and blaming themselves for it, because no one ever taught them that chronic self-abandonment feels a lot like depression. No one told them that constantly managing other people's comfort comes at the price of their own sanity. No one told them that people-pleasing is not a personality trait. It's a trauma response. These are not isolated problems. They are the natural outcomes of a system built on a single premise, that a woman's value is measured by what she gives, not what she is. And when that belief seeps into the groundwater of identity, it poisons everything, even joy. Because how can you feel joy if you're not allowed to take up space in your own life? Even intimacy, Because how can someone truly love you if you're not allowed to be fully seen? Even ambition. Because how can you pursue your dreams if you believe you're selfish for dreaming them? And here's the most insidious part. This system is self-perpetuating. A mother teaches her daughter to be nice, not because she hates her, but because she wants her to survive. A friend tells you to stay quiet, not because she doubts you, but because she knows the price of speaking. Even other women may judge you when you break the script, not because they are cruel, but because your rebellion reminds them of their own cage. This is not just personal, it's collective, and it has shaped the world in quiet, tragic ways. Entire industries profit from female insecurity. Entire religions were built on her obedience. Entire cultures have thrived by harvesting her labor, her beauty, her silence. And still she rises. Still she gives. Still she loves. But inside, something is breaking, or maybe not breaking, maybe awakening. A voice that says, "This can't be all there is." A whisper that grows louder with every sacrifice unnoticed, every need unmet, every truth swallowed. And here is where the paradox turns into pressure. The more resilient she becomes, the more the system demands her resilience. She is praised for surviving, but not supported to heal. She is honored for being strong, but never given room to rest. She is called a warrior, but given no weapons, no shelter, no space to grieve. And that, perhaps, is the most painful consequence of all, to be celebrated for enduring a world that refuses to change. But what if she stopped? What if one day she simply dropped the script? What if she refused the expectation, not with rage, but with stillness? What if the most radical act was not to fight harder, but to refuse to bleed for what no longer serves her? That is where we are headed, not toward burnout, not toward collapse, but toward rebellion, not the loud, chaotic rebellion they fear, but the quiet kind that rewrites everything. Because the next section of this journey is not about enduring anymore. It's about remembering her power and using it without apology. It never starts with fire, it starts with silence. The kind of silence that doesn't come from weakness, but from a pause. A pause before something irreversible. A silence that feels less like defeat and more like gathering. Not the kind of silence taught by fear, but the kind chosen by a woman who has finally stopped explaining. That is where rebellion begins. Not in the streets, not in the shouting, but in the moment a woman sits alone, closes her eyes and says, with her whole being, no, no to the script, no to the shrinking, no to the 1,000 tiny betrayals she's called grace. This is not rebellion as we've been taught to imagine it. It's not chaos, it's not rage. It is clarity, a sacred refusal, a return, because you cannot break free from something until you see it, clearly, nakedly, without apology. And once you see it, you can never unsee it again. That's the real danger. Not a woman who is angry or loud or difficult, but a woman who has seen the architecture of her own cage and begun to design her exit. Here is how the rebellion begins, with a radical shift, not in what she does, but in what she no longer tolerates. She stops apologizing for her ambition. She stops filtering her truth for other people's comfort. She stops equating exhaustion with success. She stops mistaking suppression for strength. And then she does something even more unthinkable. She starts asking herself what she actually wants. This is rebellion, because desire, true, self-honest, unapologetic desire, has always been the most threatening thing a woman could carry. Why? because it makes her unpredictable, uncontainable, alive. Society can handle her silence. It can even handle her compliance dressed as success. But a woman who wants, who knows her own longing, who names it, claims it, and walks toward it, is a danger to every system built on her submission. And history knows this. Look at the women who broke things, not the loud ones, but the enduring ones. Harriet Tubman didn't ask for permission. She walked into the jaws of a system and tore people out of it. Frida Kahlo painted her pain into defiance. She refused to be reduced. Simone de Beauvoir dissected the myths with philosophical precision and declared, "Woman was not born but made." Audre Lorde warned us that silence would not protect us. Malala Yousafzai took a bullet to the head because she believed girls should read books, and countless unnamed women from every corner of the world have done the same. Every woman who said, "I will not go numb," has already joined the rebellion. But let's make this clear. Rebellion is not always dramatic. It can look like staying home instead of people-pleasing, saying no without a paragraph of explanation, wearing what you want without asking if it's too much, speaking even if your voice trembles, resting without earning it, loving without shrinking, walking away without guilt. These are small acts, but they are tectonic shifts because they reclaim something that has long been stolen: agency, the right to shape your own life, not just survive it. And here's where it becomes truly counterintuitive. To break free, a woman does not need to become harder. She needs to become truer. She does not need to armor herself in stoicism or bury her softness. In fact, her softness is a rebellion. Her tenderness is a weapon, not because it hurts others, but because it heals herself. You were told that to be strong, you had to become cold. That is a lie. The real strength is in refusing to let the world desensitize you, to feel in a world that tells you to numb, to connect in a culture of disconnection, to care deeply, painfully, fully, without losing your center. That is a revolution the world does not know how to handle, because it cannot be commodified. It cannot be predicted. It cannot be controlled. But how, you may be asking? How do I actually begin? The answer is deceptively simple. You begin by telling the truth, out loud, in writing, in action, in presence. You name the places where you've lied to yourself. You name the things you've done out of fear, not choice. You name the roles that no longer fit. You name the dreams you buried because they weren't realistic. You name the rage, the ache, the hunger, and then you let those truths guide you. Not perfectly, not all at once, but consistently. You start small, because small things done truthfully become sacred over time. Think of it like this. If your life were a house, rebellion would not mean burning it down. It would mean walking through every room, opening every drawer, every locked door, every dusty attic, and asking, "Does this still belong to me?" And when the answer is no, you let it go. You return what isn't yours to carry. You remove the heirlooms of shame. You discard the furniture of silence. You repaint the walls with your own colors. And eventually, the house becomes a home again. A place where you can breathe, dance, speak, grieve, laugh. A place where you are no longer just surviving, you are living. This is not easy. It is not quick. It is not always beautiful, but it is yours. And for perhaps the first time, that is enough. Because the rebellion is not about proving anything. It's about remembering everything. Your worth, your voice, your wildness, your stillness, your contradictions, your wholeness. They tried to make you a warrior without armor. Now you are becoming something else entirely, a warrior who doesn't need armor because she no longer fights to survive. She fights to become, to unbecome, to return, to rise. And what rises in her is not fury, it is truth, a truth they cannot silence, a truth that echoes through every woman who dares to look at her life and say, I choose me. And that is not selfish, that is sacred. The final chapter awaits, the one that contains the deepest truth, the most powerful realization, not just a rebellion, but a revelation, one that changes not only how she sees herself, but how she sees reality. Are you ready for that? Imagine this. You're standing barefoot in the center of a battlefield. But there are no bodies, no swords, no blood, just echoes. You realize you've been fighting all your life, but not an enemy. What you've been at war with is your own forgetting, the forgetting of your worth, your wildness, your truth. And now, in the stillness, the ultimate realization descends, not like lightning, but like memory. You were never meant to be a warrior without armor. You were never meant to wear armor at all. Because the final truth is this: you are not here to survive the world. You are here to remember you are the world. Let that settle. You who were taught to see yourself as small, peripheral, supportive. You are not a footnote. You are not the background. You are not the side story to someone else's destiny. You are the source, the root, the origin. The word woman itself, etymologically, mythologically, cosmically, is not a variation of man. It is not a derivative. It is not a lesser form. You are not without armor. You are before armor, because armor implies danger, and danger implies war. And war implies separation. But the deepest truth is this: you were never separate from the moon, from the mountain, from the ache in another's chest, from the pulse that beats beneath all things. You are not fighting the world. You are the world waking up. This is the revelation most cannot face. The game was never about winning. It was about remembering. They told you power was domination, but your power was always resonance. They told you to conquer, but your genius was always to connect. They told you to suppress your sensitivity, but your sensitivity was always your superpower, an intelligence more ancient than logic. They told you the mind rules, but you've always known it is the heart that leads. Your truth is not made of argument. It is made of presence. And here's the paradox. When you no longer need armor, when you no longer need to prove, defend, justify, you become invincible, not because you cannot be hurt, but because you are no longer afraid of being real. The final realization is not that you are a warrior. It is that you are the battlefield and the sky above it, the wound and the wisdom, the collapse and the resurrection, the silence and the sound. You are what survives, but more importantly, you are what transforms, and transformation does not require permission. Look back, if you dare. Every time you broke down, it wasn't the end. It was a molting. Every heartbreak was a breaking open. Every silence was a seed waiting to bloom. You are not late. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are becoming in perfect, devastating rhythm. You are the alchemy they tried to name emotional. You are the prophecy they tried to dismiss as hormonal. You are the truth they buried beneath centuries of shame. And now, you are rising with no script, no shield, no ceiling. Philosopher Viktor Frankl once said that Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning. And maybe that's what this has all been about. Not escape, not survival, but meaning. And the meaning is this: you are not what happened to you. You are what you do with what happened to you. You are not a product of your suffering. You are the poetry that rose from it. The pain was never your identity. It was the forge. And what emerged is not armor. It is soul. Let this next part land like thunder. You do not need to earn rest. You do not need to justify joy. You do not need to explain your light. You do not need to be likable to be real. The final, most powerful realization is that your existence is the rebellion. That your breath, your laugh, your love, unarmored, is a revolution. You were told you were too much. You were never told you were exactly enough to change everything. Because when one woman stops betraying herself, something shifts in the fabric of the world. Not metaphorically, literally. Studies in epigenetics now confirm healing doesn't just change you. It changes your bloodline, your nervous system, your DNA. When you stop shrinking, future generations stand taller. When you choose to stay, your ancestors exhale. When you speak the truth, the silence breaks for others too. You become a tuning fork, and others will hear you, not with their ears, but with their soul. That is not magic, that is math. And now the mirror is not a weapon. Now the mirror is an altar. You look at yourself, not to criticize, not to fix, but to witness, to bow, to weep, to whisper, I remember you, the one who carried it all, the one who loved anyway, the one who stood unarmored and chose to live. This is the story of every woman who ever looked her own story in the eye and refused to call it shame. This is not a fairy tale. This is not a manifesto. This is a remembering. So now let me ask you this. If you no longer had to prove anything, if you no longer had to wear armor, if you were allowed to be entirely yourself, desire, shadow, softness, fire, who would you become? The answer does not arrive all at once, but it begins here, in this breath, in this heartbeat, in this holy, aching, radiant return to your own voice. Because in the end, the most powerful woman is not the one who has all the answers. She's the one who finally stops pretending she doesn't already know. She's the one who dares to live unhidden. And that, more than any war, any sword, any speech, is how the world changes. One woman, standing in her truth, without armor and without fear.